artist, last but not least, and a great mixed media artist. I want to fight over his stuff. We do different kind of work when we do mixed media. So he has some boxes back here. That's why I'm looking. He's bringing out some visual aids. Do you need help?
No.
Okay.
So when some of you are wondering, I could at least dress up for this. I figured it would be disingenuous to talk about process and not come as I do process. So these are my studio clothes. And I want to talk a little bit about relics and reliquaries, because not only is the umbrella notion for this show, it's very much a concept that I use in when I think about my work and how I put my work together. So, basically, but this is probably redundant to a lot of people, but a relic is an object that has been taken out of a religious or a cultural context. It has been isolated, put inside a reliquary, which is some beautifully wrought housing, and then put on public display for everybody to come and find revelation in. What I like about this process is, let's say this is the knuckle bone of St. Slovis, is that you have taken it out of its original context, the living body of Mr. Slovis. You have isolated it, you've brought it down to its most core sense. It is just now a knuckle bone. And having done so, you then exalt it. You take this completely mundane item, whether it is a bone, a piece of wood, a piece of cloth, and it's truly a found object. And you now exalt it. And you make it available to people to come and find what they will in it. So it is something that is transformative and it is redemptive. And I think about found objects that way. I like to take these things out of their normal context, where they originally came from, isolate them down, and then transform them into something else. So, just going to try not to make a mess here. This is some of my pantheon of saints and relics. So what's interesting to me is when people come to a reliquary and a relic that's in there, they all approach it with their own dynamic. So maybe I am attracted to St. Slovis because my name's Slovis, and that's great. Or maybe I was born on St. Slovis Day, and so he's my patron saint, saint of Slavs, I'm sure. Maybe he is just reflective of the larger notion of sainthood, and therefore is something I can tap into, or maybe I view it as a portal to God. So everybody can come to it with different levels, different interpretations, different stories. So I like to take objects. I love the found object, and sometimes they come with a greater context. This is a bed spring. We know it, we look at it, we associate to this directly. But you can easily break these things down into different components. So I can come in here and get different elements out of this, isolating the bed spring apart. So having removed that larger context, you get down to other things that to me start to become iconic. They become interesting symbols of other things. So something like the spring that was in there could be a double helix. Or if you put a bunch of them in a pile, you have pasta, maybe. You have a spring like this that put in one context, it's about tension. Put in another context, it's about release. You can don't be scared. I'll get it on in.
Why don't I spray it with you behind it?
You spray paint it, you put it on a blue background, and it's the Night Spheres in Van Gogh's Starry Night. It's amazing how these things can shift into different gears. So that is, so in that whole notion of taking things out of their greater context, you know, I look at something like this, which is something that came out of an old balustrade from a house in New Orleans. And that story is kind of interesting, but you have to be careful that the story doesn't overweigh the object, because to me, I like to strip away the sentiment and nostalgia from an object and get down to what is its core visual language. I mean, this is, to me, is just this lovely pierced orb, and it has both a sense of whether it may be something that has color, you know, found color, whether it's something that just has shape. When you reduce it to this, it has all of a sudden possibility starts to come out of it. And to me, one of the things that comes out is its archetypal sensibility, that it may now actually take on symbology. So the potential, just like the saint's bone, you stripped it down to something very mundane, and now you can start building it back up again. And again, so it's no longer a part of the New Orleans building. Now it is this thing. That, to me, I look at this and it's got this charred history, this patina of history on there that's so amazing. And I think what's really interesting about things like this is, taken out of its context, there's a sense of communal experience with things. People look at this and say, well, I should know what it is. Somehow, I have a connection to this, even if I don't know directly what it is, or it's not germane to my everyday life. It's like, okay, this is something I can start putting myself back onto. So, my name is Slovis.
Can I have a question?
Please.
Do you, is your process such that most of the time you find that you have all these treasures of objects and then you build your idea from there, or do you actually do like concept sketches and find the right shapes and objects, or both? Or
It's both.
It's both.
So Sarah's kind of talking about her studio leaking. My studio is this decaying building behind my house that's slowly finding its way back to the earth.
Becoming a relic.
And I have just shelves and shelves of these things that I've found over the years and collected, or that people have kindly brought to me. And so I'm in there and I live with them. I look at them all the time and we develop a dialogue. I also do, I'm going to call it journaling. A lot of my pieces I refer to as journal entries. It's a little bit of a misnomer because to me, this is my journal right here. Unfortunately, some of my best ideas end up as those little funny white balls of lint in the washer that you can't identify. So sometimes I'll, the other day I was driving behind a truck and I actually am watching the road. But the back of this truck had, the red lights in the back, and it was carrying some weird things, and it just, all I could see was the shapes and the forms that it was making. It was just completely talking to me. I waited to pull over to drive. So it's a little bit of a mix to get there. So, then back to the reliquary notion, so you find these objects, you find kind of their language and their symbology, and now you put them in the house, and then you start to exalt them and bring them back up. And hopefully to, kind of like the story of a saint, which may or may not be the original story of that person at all, to reapply a story to these things. And the story is kind of interesting to me because, a lot of times when you do abstract art, a lot of people like to ask you, what is it? And that is a question that has historically kind of irked me. And I'm realizing that it's actually not a bad question at all. Because if people are asking what is it, it means that they sense that there's a story in there that they should be getting. I think we've all been very poorly taught about abstract art. I think we're taught that if you don't get it, you're not smart enough, or you're not educated enough, or somehow you're not deep enough, which is baloney. I mean, you come to it like you do with anything. I mean, it's again, you have to come and pull the story out for yourself as to what it is. So when people ask me what is it, I'm willing to tell you, but I want to know what you think it is first. Because once I tell you what I think it is, you'll never see it any other way. It's the balcony back in New Orleans.